everyone, and welcome to Debating Metal. I'm your host, Kenneth Dean, the Dean of Metal, and along with my co-host, Chris Kaye, we discuss and dissect our favorite music, heavy metal. So sit back, relax, pop open a cold one, and let the debate begin. Welcome to the fourth episode of Debating Metal. I'm Kenneth Dean, the Dean of Metal, along with my co-host, Chris Kaye. Say hi, Chris.
Hi.
What's going on? What's going on this week, man?
Oh, well, one thing I wanted to talk about was, since we started this, it's kind of opened my eyes up to a few bands I haven't really listened to, which is kind of a cool experience. We went to a Queensryche show a few weeks ago at your insistence. And
I love Queensryche.
I had never really listened to them over the years. I'd heard a few songs here or there, but they weren't a big band on my radar. I kind of made it a goal this year to go to. I want to try to go to 12 concerts this year, at least.
At least 12.
I want to try.
Your goal was what? One a month?
One a month.
That's pretty cool. I like that.
It's tough because there's not always a band here.
We're going to do tribute bands too.
We are. We're gonna go see Sammy Hagar later this year.
Yes,
Testament.
we have our tickets for that.
So that's kind of a cool experience. For me, I was really digging what was going on with Queensryche. I like the new singer a lot, Todd LaTorre. Fantastic vocalist, a little more progressive than what it used to be, and I really enjoyed that show. So I definitely recommend to you guys out there, go out, see concerts. Even if you don't feel like you necessarily always have the time, you won't regret it. You will always enjoy getting out there and going out and doing it, just like I did.
Yeah, some of the best concerts that are out there are usually in the clubs. I mean, the small little club venues, the small little like
Scout Bar is a great one.
Yes, here in Houston, Scout Bar, House of Blues, White Oak Music Hall, Prevention Center is a little bit bigger.
Yeah, it's definitely bigger.
Sugarland Financial Center is a little bit bigger, but it's still small. They're much smaller than the arenas, and I like those shows. Those shows are really cool, especially when you have like a House of Blues or Scout Bar, where you almost feel like you can literally shake their hands if you can. And that Queensryche show was pretty awesome. When you mentioned before that Todd LaTorre is a little bit more progressive, it's weird because obviously back then they were extremely progressive in terms of metal and pop metal and heavy metal, whatever it was. But they slowly kind of almost went Pink Floyd-ish in their style.
Yeah,
to
things
a degree.
definitely changed because
I think they brought it back to being a metal progressive band.
Yeah, I like kind of the middle of their career with Jeff Tate, where they were doing. What was the Pink album?
The Rage for Order?
Yeah, Rage for Order was really cool. It was very progressive.
Right. That's their second album.
Empire was a cool album. So I like those.
It was after that they just kind of started to veer off into a little bit of a tangent.
Yeah, it just never really caught my attention until now, which I'm really glad I went to go see them. And he's brought to my attention as well Merciful Fate, which I never really listened to for kind of an odd reason. As big of a Metallica fan as I am, I'm not a fan of their version of the Merciful Fate.
I don't know what you dislike about it. I love that song.
It just never appealed to me.
To me, Metallica is one of the best bands that can put a medley together. But you disagree in that regard. You think they shouldn't be doing a medley.
Well, it's not that they shouldn't be doing a medley because I like some of them. I've just never been a fan of medleys in general. I just want to hear the whole song.
Yeah, I would love to see or hear Metallica do the whole version of Kill the King or the whole version of Terror Woman.
Oh yeah,
but they want to put something on an album, but they can't decide which song to do. Then all of a sudden it's like we'll do them all, and that's what happened with Merciful Fate. It was literally almost every song on the first album.
It was pretty close,
and they threw Curse of the Pharaoh. No, that was
Curse of the Pharaoh's from that album.
No, everything was from the first album. They didn't do anything from the second album. That was really cool. I mean, I think they did 6 out of the 8 songs that were on the first album. In 10 minutes. Or like they described 10 minutes of hell.
But I want to hear like the whole evil.
All of evil. I want to be evil from beginning to end. All right. Well, this week's topic is a sort of strange one. We're going to be talking about original band members versus replacement band members and how many are left and how many are in the band compared to, like, for instance, Quiet Riot only has one original member which technically may or may not be original depending on what time period. Guns N' Roses, bands like that. We're going to discuss their lack of original members and how they sound now and play now and all that stuff. And we're just going to basically talk about different bands, have our debate whether we like or dislike the fact that they are original or non-original. So
yeah, do you want to go out and see a band that has just the bass player or just the drummer left over? You know, what appeals to you about that lineup that's still around? Is it legitimate? Is it going to be something that where they put out 3 or 4 albums with that lineup way after, you know, the classic lineup, or is it just the tribute band basically?
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned tribute band, because I was just about to say, with the explosion of tribute bands that have been actually becoming almost like national touring acts, these other bands such as, and I'll put for example, LA Guns. Okay, LA Guns for the longest time was Stephen Riley with Phil Lewis. Phil Lewis being the original voice of LA Guns, Stephen Riley being the original drummer. Tracy Guns had left the band. He decided to do his own version of LA Guns, and then somehow, somewhere along the way, Tracy and Phil got together. They dumped Stephen Riley, and now they're touring as LA Guns. And Stephen Riley, you know, was offered a show, and now he's decided to do a full band that's LA Guns. To me, listening to the Stephen Riley version of LA Guns, or even like a Bobby Blotzer version of Rat, that's a tribute band.
Yeah.
But if you at least have the original singer or original guitar player, or there's a core of the original band members, then to me, there's some sort of semblance that that's part of the original band. Basically, that's what we're going to talk about today. We're picking bands, and we're going to, you know, nitpick and see whether or not we prefer that or the original. Is it live or is it Memorex? And the funny thing is that because so many bands today use tracks that we don't even know if it's live or Memorex or not. I'm going to go ahead and start.
Okay.
And my first band that I'm going to pick is going to be Guns N' Roses.
Okay, good one.
And even though Guns N' Roses today is very similar to the Guns N' Roses that toured under Use Your Illusion, 3 original members, there was that period of time from Spaghetti Incident on up until the reunion a few years ago where it was just Axl Rose.
It's kind of a combination of the Axl Rose version from Chinese Democracy and the original lineup. It's an amalgamation almost.
Yeah, because you have Frank Ferrara on drums, who was part of the Axl Rose, you know, solo touring band, if you want to call it that, and Richard Fortus, who was towards the latter part of the Axl Rose solo stuff. I call it that.
And Dizzy Reed's still in the band, right?
Yeah, Dizzy Reed's been there since Use Your Illusions.
He's been around for a long time.
He's the oldest tenured member of Guns N' Roses, and he's not an official member technically.
Yeah.
Well, next to Axl. All right, so my thing, Guns N' Roses. I saw Guns N' Roses on New Year's Eve, 1991. At the time, it was called Joe Robbie Stadium, which is now Dolphin Stadium. Or not now, but was Dolphin Stadium. It was the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami. That band was Axl Rose / Duff McKagan, Gilby Clarke, and what's the drummer's name? Matt Sorum on drums, Dizzy Reed on keyboards, and the whole the whole band with the horns and everything like that. That band already was missing 2 members of the original band. That didn't bother me at all. I don't think that bothers me, period, when it comes to something like that, where I'm listening to, you know, the original guitar player, original bassist, you know, and the original singer, obviously.
I'm going to disagree with you just a little bit. And my only reasoning is that when Izzy left the band, that's when they lost the progression that they were going in. They stopped recording music.
Well, yeah.
And so...
But is that Izzy's fault because he left, or is that because Axl was becoming more and more of a control freak?
It's a little bit of both. I think Izzy left because Axl was becoming a little bit more of a control freak, and he didn't want anything to do with it. He's always been kind of a chill guy, and it just wasn't the life that he wanted.
Right.
So there's a lot of factors there, and I don't think you can really pinpoint it just to one thing. It's a lot of things. But what you're saying is it doesn't bother you. Because, I mean, those classic albums are there. They produce 3 pretty solid,
right,
you know, selections of songs, and they can continue. I mean, they still That's what they're playing is off of.
Right.
Really
I mean, they're living their career off of, for the most part, 3 albums, but really just one.
But the talent was there, and had they had those original members, maybe not Steven Adler because he was gone at that point.
Well, he recorded Civil War.
Yeah,
and
but it took a lot of stringing together multiple takes to put that together because he was so messed up.
Yeah.
Would they have continued creating great music had they stayed together? But that's another question. I mean, they really weren't in good state because Slash was on drugs, etc.
Yeah, they were all on drugs. I mean, and then it shows by the real, very eclectic version or eclectic collection of songs that they put on Spaghetti Incident. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's just it's all over the place.
It's so.
I mean, it was almost more over the place than Metallica's Garage Inc. It's really, from punk songs to a 1950 songs from the Skyliners, which was their hit single off of the album. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they were all over the place, and who knows what they would be doing. But now, Slash leaves, Duff leaves, Matt Sorum leaves, Gilby Clarke leaves. Basically, they either got fired or quit or whatever. 15 years in the making, Axl Rose puts out Chinese Democracy as Guns N' Roses. He had about 37 guitar players, 15 bass players, 2 drummers. I mean, it was basically a roll call of professional musicians in the studio.
Yep.
Buckethead, Richard Bumblefoot. Bumblefoot, the bass player Tommy Stinson from the Replacements.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the credit list is 11 by 17.
So that album is Guns N' Roses. When you put the album, you think you're listening to Guns N' Roses?
Yeah, a lot of fans don't view it that way.
No, I mean, a lot of people just say it's the Axl show. When you put that album, do you feel you're listening to Guns N' Roses?
I feel like it's more of a Axl solo album.
Right. Now, oddly enough, they play 2 songs or about 2 or 3 songs off of Chinese Democracy on their current tour, on the Not in This Lifetime tour. And actually, Slash makes Chinese Democracy sound like a Guns N' Roses song because of the way he plays.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like there's a few really good songs on that album. And I guess it's hard for it's hard for a lot of people to feel that way because it is under the Guns N' Roses moniker, but it really shouldn't have been. It should have been Axl Rose's solo project. And I think the view might be different of those songs. I like Shackler's Revenge. I think it's a cool song. There's a couple others that I like. I definitely find the merit in. It's just too bad that it was released as a Guns N' Roses album.
Yeah, I don't have many nice words to say about that album. I like
Street of Dreams was a cool song.
Yeah, I don't. I listened to it. I've tried to listen to it. My friend Matt in Miami has tried to get me to listen to it. I've listened and I've gone through. I'm like, no, I can't do it. I don't know what it is. If it's the lack of a lot of hooks. Chinese Democracy, the song itself, is not a bad song, but it's got the lamest chorus. It's like, I wish if that chorus was just a little bit better. If it had a hook, that song would be monstrous, but it doesn't have a hook. So, I mean, it has a nice riff in the verses, but not in the chorus. So it just kind of, to me, it leaves almost something like there's a little empty feeling there.
Yeah.
So now they get back together to perform the Not in This Lifetime tour that started 4 years ago in 2016. And like I said, now that they're playing Chinese Democracy, it sounds like a Guns N' Roses song. It sounds like Slash is playing guitar. It's one of those things where Slash makes such a huge difference in how that band sounds just because of the way he plays, his style.
Oh, yeah.
And nothing to do with the sound of his guitar, but just the way he plays that guitar. And that's impressive. I've seen, I told you, 1991, Christmas Eve, that band. I saw the Guns N' Roses with Axl Rose and Bumblefoot and Richard Fortus, and I've seen the Not in This Lifetime tour. I would prefer to have at least those 3 members with Duff, Slash, and Axl.
For sure.
At least that. That's my preference.
I agree with you to a degree. I don't think Izzy has to be there for the sound to be there. For the songwriting aspect of it, they're not the same Guns N' Roses. They're never going to be the same Guns N' Roses as they once were. So as a nostalgia act, which they essentially are.
Yeah, and I like that band, and I like going to see them, but I hate the fact that they're a nostalgia band. And if they don't think they are, then that's kind of weird. But they are a nostalgia band.
It's kind of disappointing because Duff is still writing new music with his Loaded band, or has been up until recently. Slash is still writing new music with Miles Kennedy.
Right, with the Conspirators.
But it's just kind of unfortunate that they can't get into a room and write new Guns N' Roses.
Well, we don't know if they're not, because Slash has hinted that they are. But
they hinted that they were for, how long when when they were originally together.
I mean, I would say at least there's a good chance of it happening.
I mean, there was 3 or 4 years where they were hinting that they were getting a new lead singer for Velvet Revolver at one point, and that never happened. So.
Well, they were trying. But anyway, so Guns N' Roses, my wife and I went to see both the actual show in Miami. We saw the Not in This Lifetime tour, and we actually saw a band called Appetite for Destruction, which is a Guns N' Roses cover band, and she says she enjoyed that more than she did the actual show. So my take on that is, in this particular case, I would prefer at least the 3 original members that are currently there over not having the 3 original members. The more the better. Right, the more the better. But I think specifically Slash makes a huge difference in that particular
his guitar
instance.
tone alone.
Right, exactly.
It's synonymous with Guns N' Roses.
With Guns N' Roses touring, hopefully they'll come out with a new album, but we'll see what that is. They're back on tour again this summer, playing baseball stadiums. Well, that concept seems to be popping up again and again and again with the Motley Crue Poison Def Leppard tour, playing baseball stadiums. Anyway, let's move on to the next band that we want to talk about, and then that was your choice. So what do you got?
I just kind of briefly want to mention 2 bands.
Okay.
Not metal bands, but rock bands. And my question is, so you have a band like Foreigner. Foreigner, they're not the same as they used to. I mean, you have Mick Jones. This is the only one left from the original band.
The only one left, and he doesn't always play every show.
What's that?
And he doesn't always play every show.
Yeah, so you never know what you're getting. It's kind of a gamble. You've got Lou Gramm, who left in 2003, so it's been almost 20 years since the original. What you would hear on the radio would be playing in front of you. Mm-hmm. So, are you inclined to go see?
I did.
You did?
I did. I saw them last year.
And you enjoyed it?
You know what? Okay, so the singer that they have now, I don't know his name. I can't remember what his name is. He's a Steven Tyler lookalike, almost a Steven Tyler clone. Excellent singer. Mm-hmm. He's not that he sounds like Lou Gramm, because I think he has his own tone and his own sound, but he's a great singer, so he overcomes that.
But is that going to see to you? Is that going to see Foreigner, or is it going to see a cool band?
In this particular case, I didn't even know who was in Foreigner to begin with, so I wouldn't know if they were or weren't in the band at all.
Okay.
It's a valid point. I mean, I know Jeff Pilson's in the band now, but I know he's not the original bass player. But damn it, if he's not standing back there rocking the entire show, I mean, he's the only headbanger in the band. They put on a great show. Mm-hmm. A virtually sold out Cynthia Woods Mitchell Pavilion proved that, yes, a band like that with only one original member can succeed.
Were they the headlining act?
They were the headlining act. They had Whitesnake was one of the acts. That was there. Oh, and Jason Bonham's Led Zeppelin Experience. Jason, so basically it was Jason Bonham cover band, Led Zeppelin cover band, with Whitesnake, who the only person there from the original thing is David Coverdale, but he's a little bit different.
That's a little different story.
But still, it's not the same bluesy band that it was in the 70s.
David Coverdale is Whitesnake.
Right, is Whitesnake.
He can pick and choose who's in the band, and it's always going to be Whitesnake because it's David Coverdale. Right.
And then there was the Foreigner cover band that played as Foreigner. Okay. And I tell you what, it was one of the most enjoyable evenings for music because you got to hear Led Zeppelin, and they did a great, fantastic job. You got to hear Whitesnake, and you got to hear Foreigner. I mean, it was 3... I mean, they're all rock bands. One a little more metal, one a little bit more heavy.
Yeah.
And then, Foreigner. I mean, Foreigner rocked the house. I mean, I'm not a big Foreigner fan, but it was a great show. I would not have a problem if someone gave me free tickets. I would go back.
I guess just for me, when I know that it's not going to be what I'm used to, they haven't really put out any albums. They put out one album with the new guy.
Foreigner?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not an album that has any hit songs on it. Mm-mm. So most people are not realizing what they're going to go see.
Right.
In a way, it's almost false advertising. It's not, but it is.
Right, I get it.
The average Joe is going to go to the concert and go, what?
But then again, what about like Leonard Skinner? Mm-hmm. Was that on your list at all?
It wasn't, but we can definitely talk about it.
But Leonard Skinner is the same type of way. I think there was one original member left, and I think he was like the keyboard player.
But the singer is the younger brother.
Right.
Yeah.
It was family. I get that, but it was weird because it was really nobody left in the band.
It's kind of an odd case.
Sort of like, I think before the Allman Brother band broke up, they were very similar type of thing. Mm-hmm. So, I don't have a problem with it so much. Again, I didn't even know who the hell was in Foreigner to begin with. And I think unless you were a super diehard Foreigner fan, you have no idea who was in that band other than Mick Jones and Lou Gramm. And Lou Gramm's not there anymore.
Yeah.
So, and although he played some shows last year with them, came out to a couple, but he's not able to tour.
Yeah. So I also wanted to mention Thin Lizzy, who has no original members.
No original members.
That being said, Scott Gorham's kind of associated with the classic lineup of the band. Right. Mm-hmm. So in a way, he's carrying the torch. But I almost view the current lineup as just a tribute to the original.
I think that's what it's meant to be, as a tribute, to keep the music alive.
Exactly.
And to have someone who at least was associated with the original music.
Almost how Pantera will never be around again.
Right.
But they can continue on, the music continues on as, Phil plays Pantera songs live.
But see, now in that instance, I mean, Pantera is a lot more than just Phil. Obviously, it had a lot to do with Dimebag and Vinny.
Yeah, for sure.
But what's funny, I mean, if Phil decided to get back together with Rex and say this is Pantera and have a killer guitar player, are people going to get upset?
I think a lot of people would get upset.
There'll be a faction of people that will get upset. But if they were doing it in a way to, quote unquote, honor Pantera,
I think in any way it has to honor Pantera.
Are the people going to stay upset? If they come out as a recording band, and they put 2-3 albums out, do people get upset? I mean, that's obviously a question that will probably never be answered.
I think for sure if they did and they put out albums and they didn't acknowledge, what came before, of course it's going to upset people.
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't talk about Dimebag Darrell and
Oh, I mean, Dimebag is on everyone's, the forefront of everyone's imagination when it comes to guitar players and sound and stuff like that.
That's half the band right there that's no longer alive.
Right.
So, yeah, but I think with everything that's happened and interviews that people have seen with Phil and it just everything that's evolved since they had their falling out, I don't think people would be upset to see more shows.
No, I mean, everyone, from what I understand,
you got to have a killer guitarist.
Yeah. I think Phil and his band, The Illegals, are putting out they're playing Pantera songs, and I think they're playing Pantera sets right now. People are loving it because it's Phil, and you hear the voice of Pantera.
But they're still quite aware that when they go, it's not Pantera.
Right, yeah, you're seeing it on the marquee, it's Phil and the Illegals.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they know what they're getting, but at least he's out there keeping the music alive in that regards.
But back to Thin Lizzy.
Okay.
They haven't put out any new albums with this lineup. They're just kind of continuing to play.
Have they or have they not?
Well, they did back when they originally got back together, and that was with
John Sykes.
It was with John Sykes.
Right, John Sykes.
That incarnation of the band no longer exists, and that still had several of the members from the time with Phil in it. But now there's just Scott Gorham, and I really feel like it's more of a therapeutic thing. You go out there, play the music that they played together, and I don't have any problem with that.
And if I'm not mistaken, some of the guys that are in Thin Lizzy are the ones that are in Black Star Riders. And Black Star Riders is a pretty good band. I saw them open up for Priest, and that was a pretty cool show. That is definitely more purposely aligned with a tribute style of show. I mean, they're Thin Lizzy, and the money goes to a Thin Lizzy type setup as opposed to just being, guys on the side doing a tribute. But it is definitely an homage. I was going to say homage. An homage to Thin Lizzy and to Phil Lynott. So from here, we're going to talk about Rainbow and Ritchie Blackmore and his ever-revolving cast of characters that played in Rainbow. Although that was something that was kind of by design in his mind, I guess. Ritchie was always in quest to have the best band. You would think he had a great guitar player. You would think he had a great bass player, and he would change the bass player. Although Roger Glover became a mainstay. You thought he had a good drummer, but then he didn't like the way he drummed too much, or he was too double bassy, and then he changed that drummer. Keyboard player changes. And even vocalists. I mean, he had 4 different vocalists, or 5 technically. Now there's a 5th one.
In the few times that they've gotten together.
So there was never the same band that recorded twice, regardless of whether it's a keyboard player change, drummer change, bass player change, vocalist change.
He was as inconsistent with his lineups as he is with playing solos live.
Yeah. So in the case of Rainbow, is that something that is bothersome?
I kind of view it in the same way as with Whitesnake. It's Ritchie Blackmore's vehicle. He kind of did with it what he wanted. They had kind of a similar lineup in the first couple albums. Like you said, something changed.
Yeah, I think they changed their keyboard player from one to the next.
Yeah. So,
and then I think the third album they changed, Roger Glover took over for Jimmy Bain.
So whenever that was kind of established, it just kind of became commonplace with that band.
But I was it something back in the day? Now, obviously, I'm the one who lived through more of it than you did. So the question is, was it something that was expected, or was it something that was known that was going to happen, or was it something that you thought we had a band here, but now all of a sudden they changed it on us again? Me, living through it, I mean, I didn't live through the Graham Bonnet to Joe Lynn Turner change, but
they didn't really become big in the U.S. until Joe Lynn Turner took over the band.
But I saw the videos. I mean, they had, the video for All Night Long was pretty popular when I was growing up, and I liked that song a lot. And I see Rainbow, and it's like, well, there's a different singer. And then I saw the video for Can't Happen Here with Joe Lynn Turner. That was on the Difficult to Cure album. Then the next album comes, if I'm not mistaken, it's a different keyboard player again.
We can talk about that. The keyboard player, I think we had a conversation outside of this where it's probably not the biggest difference in the sound.
You could put the same, you can always have the same exact sound on the keyboard, and there's not going to be a lot of inflection in terms of how the person plays it.
There's very few bands where the keyboard is so important that it would be different sound. It'd be recognizable. This is different if it wasn't the same keyboard. I mean, very few. I can think of one off the top of my head.
Who's that?
That would be Children of Bodom.
Okay.
Where the keyboard is basically the secondary guitarist.
Well, and that's like Deep Purple. Mm-hmm. But I mean, Deep Purple had John Lord the whole time.
Yeah.
They changed. Now they have Don Airey. I haven't heard them to sit there and say, "Oh, there's a big difference."
Yeah.
But you're saying with children,
but that's with recording new music, and more of that than, I mean, they can have somebody come and play the old parts, and nobody would notice because they're excellent musicians up there playing. But as far as the writing process for new music, going forward to a new album, a keyboardist change would be very noticeable.
Is he a main, or was he a main songwriter, or is he a main songwriter?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so that does make a big difference there.
That's another one I'm going to mention later because there's only one original member left. But yeah, back to Rainbow. I think probably at the time, through the years, it was counterproductive to what Ritchie Blackmore wanted, which was to break into America and have this solid band. But by changing something every time, probably a lot of people didn't take notice. Because you've got a lineup where somebody goes, "Oh, I love that guy. I'll listen to anything with that guy in the band," and he's not on the next album. It's hard to go, okay,
Well, I mean, and I
want
also
to stay with these guys.
Right. Well, the same thing too is not a lot of people knew about Rainbow in the early days. So, switching from Jimmy Bain to Roger Glover wasn't a noticeable difference. Switching from Tony Carey to David Rosenthal wasn't a big difference keyboard wise. And even
but the singer changes.
Right. But the singer changes from Ronnie James Dio to Graham Bonnet to Joe Lynn Turner,
All very
and then
different
Joe Lynn
singers.
Turner to Doogie White. By the time Doogie White era came around, it was just like, who the hell's Rainbow? It was just Ritchie Blackmore, and it was just a guitar player. And that's just kind of weird about it, because unlike Foreigner, at least Foreigner had only two singers, and it was one where the band stopped and then they reformed and had this new singer, and he was going to be, and he's been permanent all that time, where with Ritchie, with all different singers, and now he's got his fifth singer, this guy named Ronnie. I think he's a Spanish guy from Europe. Although he does the songs justice, it's just, to me, it doesn't sound the same. It doesn't seem the same.
Oh, yeah.
Unlike with Rainbow, Ritchie Blackmore, and Deep Purple, okay? Ian Gillen was their singer for a long time. And then
Second singer of the band.
Technically second singer. But the one, with the Mark II lineup and the Mark III lineup, the Mark II lineup, that's where they got most of their fame. They changed singers 4 times as well. From the original singer that no one recognizes to Ian Gillen to then Glenn Hughes and David Coverdale, or more David than Glenn. And then the band broke up, got back together with Ian Gillen. Ian left again, and then and all this because of Ritchie. They got Joe Lynn Turner, which at that point it was more Rainbow than it was Deep Purple. I mean, literally Ritchie, Joe, and Roger Glover. There was 3 fifths of Rainbow in there, and so and I think it ended up sounding that way. Now Deep Purple is who they are. They've been together for as long as they've been, and the only constant has been Ian Pace because John Lord passed away. Steve Morse has been in Deep Purple longer than Ritchie. And Don Airey took over for John Lord when he passed away, and Ian Gillen's back, and Roger Glover has been there the whole reunion time. You see Deep Purple now, but you recognize Ian Gillen. It could be anybody else. You recognize Ian Gillen, but it's Deep Purple. With Rainbow, it's Rainbow because you hear Ritchie's guitar playing, but it just sounds like a different band.
It sounds like a different band through the albums, because you have the more kind of Dungeons and Dragons-esque lyrics of Ronnie in the first few albums, and then it changes to much more commercial appeal with Graham Bonnet and Joe Lynn Turner, even more so with Joe Lynn Turner. And that's where like the comparison of them to Whitesnake to me falls apart, because as much as he was trying to create that commercial appeal, much like Whitesnake was. After that album, the self-titled Whitesnake album, and Slide It In, those 2 albums, even though there was lineup changes, there was a really consistent sound. Whereas there was never really a consistent sound for Rainbow,
right? Because
he's just so eclectic and wanted to keep changing things.
Well, in mentioning Whitesnake and going along those same lines. Even if you want to think about it, even Whitesnake is a different band, and not because of its personnel, but they were a blues rock band. They were
initially before Slide It In.
Before Slide It In, even Slide It In for the most part is a blues rock album,
but less so with the American release.
Yeah. But they had this bluesy sound to them, hard rock but bluesy. They relied a lot on keyboards playing off with the guitar, so it was very similar to Deep Purple and Rainbow type of thing.
And Scorpions, even when Scorpions had Uli John Roth, they were more of a bluesy band until the 80s, when they really branched more into a consistent sound. Right.
So much like how Ritchie wanted to break in America, David wanted to break America, and with Slide It In, that was his vehicle. He's like, you know what, they re-recorded some of the parts. They remixed it. They had this hit album. And now he's like, I want to break this market. So he got rid of some of the guys because he was really wanting to break in, but he didn't want to break in with a bunch of ugly fat guys, that played really good, but the look wasn't there.
Yeah.
So he besides the sound, he wanted the look, and he got it with the 1987 band.
Yep.
With John Sykes. And that wasn't even then. It was John Sykes and who was the other guitar player? Adrian Vandenberg. And then after 1987, what was that album? Slip of the Tongue is where the 1987 touring band came together. Rudy Sarzo, Vivian Campbell, and Steve Vai, because Vivian didn't leave right away.
Yeah.
So that's where the sound has continued and maintained. That's been Whitesnake ever since, like you said earlier. So with Rainbow, to recap that, Rainbow is not a big thing as far as what you're hearing. You know you're going to see Richie, and you just don't know who you're going to get on the rest of it.
If you get to see Rainbow.
Right. Well, that's right. The few shows that Rainbow played last year, he brought out his band from the Renaissance stuff that he was doing, and had Ronnie as a singer.
I guess we're just fortunate to get to see, or I say we, but anyone that gets to go see Rainbow, because for the longest time he wasn't even doing rock music.
Right.
He was doing the Renaissance style music with his wife.
All right. So who's next up on the list?
I wanted to mention Riot.
Riot. Holy cow! You threw me for a loop on that one.
Riot's kind of an odd one because, much like Rainbow, there's been constant personnel changes since 1975. They've had 6 singers, 8 drummers. I think it's around 6 bassists.
So who's the original member?
Well, there's no original members.
There's no original members.
The only original member that was around died in 2012. That was Mark Reel. So what's interesting to me about them is that they're no longer even called Riot. They're called Riot 5. So
like the 5th incarnation type
basically.
Of thing? Okay.
And that was formed after Mark Reel died. They kind of stopped for a little bit, and then they continued on with some of the members from that lineup to basically be a tribute band to themselves, and but they were, I think they were addressing it kind of in the right way. They're not the same band. They're not Riot.
Right.
But they're addressing the fact that there's no original members left. I think that's why it's kind of an interesting case to me.
I have to be honest. I don't know anything about Riot, except for the song I heard last week when we were talking about instrumentals, and it was really cool. I will have to say, in a situation like that, to me, you have no original members. At the same time, what I feel makes it legitimate is that you have a member from the band who is willing to accept and move forward as that band because he was part of whatever core was originally there.
Yeah.
There are times where, there are bands that have singers or drummers or guitar players or whatever, musicians, that the first album, it just didn't work. They were together for the first album because the music was good, but the band didn't necessarily click.
Yeah. And
on the second album, they changed this, that, and the other guy, and all of a sudden it clicked. So that second album is the classic era, and then you go on from there, and then somewhere along the way,
Anthrax,
right,
singer change,
singer change, bass player change, So you go through these, I guess, waves of personnel. Perfect example, actually, is Iron Maiden. Okay, you go first album, you got Paul Di'Anno singer, Dennis Stratton on guitar. Obviously you have Clive Burr on drums, and you have Steve and Dave, on bass and guitar respectively. The next album you change
2/5 of the original lineup that's still around. Right.
Next album you change guitar player, even though that's the guitar player you wanted years ago, but he finally came around. Then the third album you change the singer. Then the fourth album you change the drummer. So you've changed your entire lineup except for 2 guys in 3 albums. At that point it was starting to get almost ridiculous. Like, it was very reminiscent to Rainbow.
But they put out 6 albums.
Well, shit, they were good albums.
Yeah. Well, I say 6 albums. I mean, you lose Adrian Smith for that last album before.
Oh, you're talking about Fear the Dark?
Fear the Dark.
Well, Adrian wasn't on the other one either.
No, he was in the writing process, and he wrote one of the songs on No Prayer for the Dying. Yeah. So his presence was still felt in some way. But yeah, you're right. He wasn't on the album. Yeah, I totally agree. But you had a large core of that time as that it was the classic lineup, right? Well, much like Fleetwood Mac with their classic lineup.
What happens is Bruce, obviously Steve is for Iron Maiden is the core. He is the heart and soul of Iron Maiden.
He's the lifeblood.
But Bruce adopted Iron Maiden. Bruce, that became his band. He was the man out front. Mm-hmm. Even though Dave has been there since day one on the first album, technically you can consider him an original member or not. because he wasn't part of the original birth of Iron Maiden, but he's been there longer than any other person.
He's been there since the first album.
Right. So, but Dave's relatively quiet in that sense. But each time they get this next guy, so Adrian comes in, and Adrian stays on until No Prayer for the Dying comes back, and he's been there longer now than he was the first time. Yannick has been there longer than Adrian has been overall. The third longest tenured player is Nico.
Yeah.
So all those guys, Nico adopted Iron Maiden. He is the face of Iron Maiden in many cases because he's the one always doing the interviews.
Yeah.
You know, he'll do an interview before Bruce will do an interview. He'll do an interview before Steve will do an interview. And definitely before Dave and Adrian. He's the main face. Obviously, Steve is Iron Maiden. But we as fans have adopted each of those guys to sit there and say, yes, this is what I want with this band. So if a band like say, for instance, Riot continues on as Riot 5, but that's the band that the people want to see, even though the heart died, you know, then to me that's okay.
Yeah, no, I have no problem. I would honestly have no problem if they continued as the original version, but it's just, it is what it is. I kind of like that it was more of a tribute aspect of that. Now, that being said, you brought up a point where the first couple albums didn't necessarily work, so something changed. Well, Quiet Riot would be a good example of that, where it's almost two different versions of the band. You have the first two albums that didn't appear in America, didn't appear in Merca. And that would be the Randy Rhoads Incarnation, the first two albums with Kevin DuBrow on vocals. But then they broke up. A year or so later, they reformed a new version of Quiet Riot, the socially accepted version, what people would view as the first album would be, the Quiet Riot album.
The one that came out in 82.
With Come On Feel the Noise.
82 or 83?
83, I believe.
Yeah.
So you had that version, and that would be what most people would even know as Quiet Riot. So they now have no original members. If you go back
not counting Frankie.
to the very first, but you have Frankie Manali, who's been on every album since that first reestablishment of the band. So it's kind of, is it the original lineup? No, but most people didn't know the original lineup.
Right. You and I had this conversation. I almost negate the first two Quiet Riot albums as being original band because, again, to me, it's similar to that other thing I mentioned where it's the formative years. You have all these guys coming in and out of the band. I mean, Iron Maiden went through 20 different guitar players and 3 different singers before they settled on Paul.
But they never recorded anything.
No, right. They never recorded.
Before. That's the difference.
True. With, so to me, it almost seems like, why you have a recording contract in Japan. I mean, really, it's almost pointless. You have no one that in your neighborhood is going to hear that album because they're never going to be able to get it unless you give them a free copy.
But they were popular in Japan.
Right. Like I was hearing today, or I was informed today about Crocus. And there's a very Mark Storace or Storace. I apologize if I pronounced your name wrong. He was not even a replacement singer. He was added because the rest of the band was, they're multi-instrumentalists. They played every other instrument. The drummer was a singer for some songs. The keyboard player was a singer for other songs. The guitar player was a singer for other songs. They finally got one singer, and that was Mark. So they stabilized their lineup. The first album that they released, they only had 4 guys in the band, and 2 of them left right after the album was released. But that album only had 500 copies pressed, so no one even considers it their first album. So
almost more like a demo.
Almost like I would say the same thing. Probably other people's demos have sold more than that thing has. Yeah, so,
because they were pressed more than once.
Probably, yeah. So that's a kind of a weird situation with that one. So let's move on and let's talk about a big name that has gone through a ton of lineup changes only to come back to the original, and that was Black Sabbath, was. Yeah, there was because they're over. Black Sabbath have gone through, 38 singers.
487.
And that was like a 4-year span.
My grandma was a singer for.
I heard that album.
My grandma was Tony Martin.
Well, she's very manly.
So Black Sabbath, everybody knows about the big major changes with Ozzy leaving the band, Dio being the replacement for 2 albums, Ian Gillen's run. But yeah, I mean, they had a lot more incarnations than than were even recorded. So you go to see them live, and really for a while there, from 1979 to basically when they reformed in the 90s with Ozzy, you had kind of, I said 90s, I meant 2000s.
But they did reunite with him in the 90s.
They did. You're towards the end of the 90s?
Yeah, towards the end, because that's when I saw them at Ozfest. And
so it was like, I'm misremembering.
Ozfest 99, it was Black Sabbath headlining.
That's true. Okay, so late 90s, they reformed with Ozzy. Almost 20 years later, I think it was like 17 years later was when they finally got back to the original lineup. In between that time, you got Seventh Star, which had no original members. I mean, you had had Tony. Yeah, well, you're right. And Tony was the one consistent throughout the entire run. So when I say no original members, I mean other than Tony.
Right.
Tony was Black Sabbath for a long time. I can't imagine having gone to a show during that time and just not knowing who I was going to see.
Oh, I mean, obviously, if you go to Black Sabbath, you're expecting, there's an expectation. In the 90s, or let me put it this way, in the 80s, you had no idea because 80 and 81 was Dio, and then 82 was Gillen.
And it's amazing when you say 80 and 81 because he had such a huge impact on that band. A lot of people will go, Ozzy or Dio, who's the better Black Sabbath singer, right? But he was only in the band for such a brief amount of time.
And he came back in 92 for
one album, for Dehumanizer.
For Dehumanizer. And again, I guess the same problems cropped up again, and he left. So, but in between Dehumanizer and Mob Rules, they had, I think, three different singers.
You had Ian Gillen, you had Tony Martin, and
didn't Glenn Hughes do one?
Glenn Hughes did the one album,
right? And then at one point they were supposed to have Ray Gillen sing for them. He's on a demo.
He's on a demo for Eternal Idol.
He was supposed to be in the band, so that's there was 4 different singers.
Oh, there's more than that. There's Dave Donato. There's a number of lineup changes that didn't even occur on an album.
Right, and at the same time, between Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, Bill Ward left and Vinny Appice came in. And then Vinny Appice left with Dio, and then Bill Ward came back and did Born Again with Ian Gillen as a singer. So you got 3/4 of the original Sabbath with new singer. Then everybody left, I think.
So Seventh Star would be the next album.
Yeah, so I don't even know who's on Seventh Star. I don't know if Geezer's on there.
Glenn Hughes was the singer.
So Glenn, I'm assuming he played bass probably too?
I don't think so.
But who?
Yeah,
and who was the drummer? Cozy Powell, I think.
Yes, Cozy Powell.
So they had a revolving, door of musicians that came and played bass and drums and sang. So that was difficult until they came back. Then Ozzy decides to announce his No More Tours tour.
Eric Singer was
the
drummer
Eric
on
Singer.
Seventh Star, not Cozy Powell.
Ah, okay.
Which you should know as
a big Kiss fan.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's where Eric Singer and Ray Gillen's connection came together, and they were in Badlands together in '89. You see that at the end of the '90s when they decide to reunite and Ozzy's doing the Ozfest, and or not even that, before that, Ozzy decides, I'm going to do No More Tours. He does his No More Tours tour in the middle '90s. He actually calls up Black Sabbath. He calls up the 3 remaining members and says, hey, can you guys, or would you guys mind opening for me in my last show? And so essentially you would have gotten Black Sabbath with, supposed to be, the request was with Ronnie James Dio. And I think that may have been what happened with the Dehumanizer. I think that's why he left.
What ended up happening was Rob Halford.
Right. So Rob Halford ends up coming in to do it because Ronnie says there's no way in hell that he's going to do Black Sabbath open for Ozzy. So he was gone again. That's like a 6th or 7th singer for Black Sabbath, Rob Halford. I mean, I would love to get a hold of the tapes, and I know they're out there. I would love to get a hold of a bootleg version with Rob singing those Black Sabbath songs because he does such a good job. So Black Sabbath goes through all these changes. They finally get Geezer back. Tony, they get Ozzy back. They even get Bill Ward back for a bit during the reunion shows.
And Geezer was in and out of the band during that long stretch.
Yeah, he was in and out of Ozzy's band too.
Yeah.
He played with Ozzy on that Just Say Ozzy EP, that live EP. So he was in Ozzy's band. So you're talking about half of Black Sabbath there.
Yeah.
And they even played Black Sabbath songs. They come full circle. They reunite with Ozzy. They reunite with Bill. They do that. Then they kind of go away a little bit for a while in the late 2000s. They don't really do much. So now they decide they're going to do their final album, or make a new album, which was 13. Bill ends up not being on the album. They tour with it with Tommy Clufidos as the drummer, and
which he didn't record on the album.
No, it was the dude from Rage Against the Machine, Brad Wilk.
Brad Wilk.
So Brad Wilk records the album. Tommy tours. In the meantime, somewhere along the way in there, in the late 2000s. Let me correct all that. In the late 2000s, Black Sabbath ended their time with Ozzy.
They did a run with Ronnie.
And then they got back with Ronnie as Heaven and Hell. And that was with Vinny Appice.
Well, no, they did.
Well, they did shows as Black Sabbath.
Then when they decided to do another one with Ozzy, they decided, let's make this Black Sabbath, and then we're going to call this Heaven and Hell.
Right. So so Tony was playing both sides on that one. But I mean, it's just they were basically reliving both eras, which is really cool.
And they both Ronnie and Ozzy were accepting of that they were going to do two different projects at different times. They scheduled them that way.
Right. That goes along with which one was better. Who do people like better, the Ozzy years or the Dio years? And there are distinctly two different camps when it comes to that. I like both, but I'm going to lean towards the Ozzy years just because that is what became and is Black Sabbath.
I'm going to agree with you as that is Black Sabbath, but I like Heaven and Hell just as much.
Oh yeah, I mean Heaven and Hell is an amazing album.
Yeah, those first 6 albums for Black Sabbath are just touchstones. I mean, you can't deny the amazingness of those albums. But those 2 albums with Dio, the first 2, were phenomenal. And I liked Dehumanizer a lot. I can understand why it's not as popular because it's kind of it's not as eclectic. It's very mechanical sounding, almost on purpose.
It's very 90s sounding.
Yeah, but Heaven and Hell, the album, The Devil You Know, was fantastic.
Yes, it was good, very good album. Now that we brought that up with the 2 singers, 2 different factions, okay, we're gonna wrap this up with a couple of different bands real quick, but we have to talk about Van Halen. There's only 2 people left in the original Van Halen. That's Van Halen and Van Halen. All right. That's a band that had a distinct 2 different careers. I mean, there's no denying. I mean, where Black Sabbath kind of had a couple years and then they kind of went away and they had that rough patch in the late 80s and early 90s. Van Halen had 2 different careers. There was Van Halen with Dave from 78 or they're when they formed up until 1984, and then 85 until 90 something with Sammy. Then they tried to get Dave back. Then they tried to get Sammy back, and then they went back and forth. It was like a really bad divorce and marriage over and over and over again. And then they just
in their music career and out of the music career.
and then they get we'll get this guy Gary Sharon from Extreme for one album, and that was a disaster. And they get Sammy back temporarily. And
I really feel, and we can definitely touch on this later, but I don't really have any problem with Gary Sharon as a singer. I just think they did things the wrong way with him.
Yeah.
Now, whereas going on tour immediately with Sammy had his own material. It was solo material. Van Halen had a breadth of their own material, but Gary couldn't come in and do Extreme songs. He needed to come in and do Van Halen.
Right.
And they thought, let's go and record an album so that way we've got material for Gary. and then let's go on tour. I really wish they had gone on tour with him first, and then got to know each other better. He wasn't the instant fit that Sammy was, but it doesn't mean he couldn't have been better for that band for the time.
At least play a few shows.
Play some shows together, feel each other out, figure out if they needed to record an album with this guy. Because it may have never worked, and it clearly didn't.
Yeah.
So,
but a lot of that too had to be the fact that Eddie was just out of his mind. Mm-hmm. I mean, literally,
the songwriting wasn't there on Van Halen.
When I say out of his mind, he was literally on some crazy drugs. I don't want to speculate what they were, but they were drugs. Drugs and alcohol, and that's what ruined him. And even though he later got himself and his act back together, but it wasn't until way after, because when they reunited with Sammy, there was still a problem, and that's the reason why they definitively broke up after that tour.
Yeah,
they kicked Michael out of the band. I mean, I feel bad for anybody in that band. I feel bad for Michael. I mean, it was like they almost emasculated the guy. I mean, they took away his songwriting rights. They took away his performance rights. They took everything away from Mike. So he doesn't even make any money off Van Halen anymore.
Yeah, he didn't even record on the last couple albums.
Right, he didn't. He didn't play. I think he played the bass on one song on the Best of Both Worlds because Eddie played the bass on the other one, and then.
Well, there were three. There were 3 songs on that album.
Oh, that's right. There was a.
But Eddie recorded on 2 of them. It's speculated that Michael Anthony played on one song, and then on Van Halen 3, the rumor is that he didn't record any of the music.
I think he played on one song.
Maybe it was one song
because he did the background vocals for it as well. Mm-hmm. And that was it. And then he's out of the band, and Wolfie's in there. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I get it. I get Wolfie. I get the whole thing about Wolfie, but you don't have to disrespect the man's legacy, Michael's legacy, the way it was done.
And he was so important to the sound of that
band.
Yeah. His backing vocals are synonymous with the sound of Van Halen.
And I think more than anything, him and Sammy, the way that they sing together is very unique because you hear that sound now on Chicken Foot and on The Circle. Mm-hmm. The two of them, the way they sing with each other, it's a perfect match. Mm-hmm. So along that same vein, to some degree, with I guess more like the Black Sabbath vein, Megadeth had 1 million members come in and out, but the mainstay was Dave, or is Dave.
Well, even David Ellefson I would say, is a mainstay. There was only a brief period for a few years there where he wasn't in the band. To me, the biggest part of their sound. I mean, because Dave's the main songwriter, he's the singer, and then David Ellefson's there, and he's only gotten better over time. The two of them, that's what really makes their most solid albums.
Right, and so for me, Megadeth has always been about Dave and mm-hmm. Junior. During that really hazy period when Dave got hurt and then Junior left, and then he reforms Megadeth but doesn't ask Junior back, and then he gets James Lomenzo. They had, several different drummers, several different guitar players. The one thing that I like about Megadeth is that they've always had the highest echelon of players in the band.
He doesn't accept anything but the best.
But the thing I dislike about that is that, according to Dave, every player that comes in is the best player, better than the guy before him. And we all know that's Dave is being Dave, and I hate that saying. To me, I find it disrespectful. It's like, you know what? Marty Friedman is one hell of a guitar player. Mm-hmm. Are we saying that Chris Broderick's better than him? No one knows, because Chris has his own thing. Marty has his own thing. And now, Kiko, he has his own. They're all different styles of players. And I personally don't like when someone sits there and says, well, this guy's better than the last guy. Well, first of all, the last guy's still alive. Let's not, disparage the dude, knowing that he's an incredibly talented guitarist. Chris Broderick is incredibly talented. Marty Friedman's incredibly talented. Chris Poland is incredibly talented, although he doesn't play metal anymore, but he's incredibly talented. All those guys, and then drumming wise, Gar Samuelson was an incredible drummer. To play metal the way he played metal in a jazz style mm-hmm. was awesome. Then they get, was it Chuck Beeler for the third album?
Yeah,
something like that. That was almost like pointless. He was in and out so fast you didn't even know who he was. And then came Nick Menza. Nick is a great drummer. Excuse me. Nick's a great drummer. Now, after Nick, you get an assortment of players. Which Drover is it? It's not Glenn, is it?
Sean Drover.
Sean Drover. And then after Sean Drover, there was it Chris Adler?
Chris Adler.
Okay. And another drummer, Jimmy DeGrasso was also in the band. So he's been through a tremendous amount of drummers. Finally settling on Dirk. I have no idea what his last name is.
Dirk Verburen.
Yeah. Do you know him
better than I do?
He
was from
Soilwork. So Dirk is now, he's currently, they're in the midst of writing their new album. And so he's finally going to make his recording appearance with Megadeth. So they've been through a million things. But yes, like you said, Dave and Junior being the mainstays, really the sound has progressed technologically wise. You know it's Megadeth. And you know that this is that band, because of Dave.
What you're saying about the way that Dave speaks, I don't really, again, to go back to Whitesnake, I don't really see it much different than the way that he handles it. I mean, I've heard in multiple interviews him talk about members of the band the same way. That he'll say that they're great musicians, but they just didn't fit what I wanted to be in, so they weren't in the band.
But I don't know if it's the English accent that Dave speaks with, but he says it so much nicer. And I'm talking with David Coverdale, because I don't ever see it as a disparagement from David, where Mustaine is it's a disparagement, and he doesn't mean it
personally,
but it's so blunt that he sounds like an asshole when he says it. Where David, listening to Coverdale speak, he can insult you and you still walk away happy. That's just a weird thing of the way he speaks.
Well, I love you, Dave.
I mean, I met Mustaine, and again, at that time he was recovering. It was one of the first early times of his recovery, and he was very bitter about his recovery because, his friends were all out enjoying themselves and he had to stay home playing Nintendo in his hotel room.
Sounds like a delight to me, but
well, yeah, but he wanted to go out and get trashed, and he couldn't, or he wouldn't, because of his recovery. But of course he fell off the wagon several more times after that. There's no denying Mustaine's an incredible guitar player. There's no denying that Megadeth is an incredible band, no matter who's in the band. And he's always striving for perfection. That being said, is there a problem with going to see Megadeth? No, because when you go see Megadeth, you're going to see Dave.
Your expectation is to see Dave.
If Mustaine leaves and it's only Junior, it's not Megadeth.
That's a question.
Right. So that's where things are different. It's not the same.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and not to mention any bands, because I don't know them off the top of my head, there are times where there have been singers in bands that are sick, hurt, injured, whatever it is, that can't perform, where other people will step in their place in a live setting, especially like a festival type setting.
Like we mentioned before with Rob Halford covering.
Right, covering for
But that happened twice. I mean, it wasn't just with the Dio situation. It was later on to cover for Ozzy.
So, yeah, those things happen, and a lot of times other musicians cover for other musicians. When Lars missed the only Metallica show he's ever missed, and they had 3 different drummers come play. They had Lombardo, and they had Joey Jordison. I forgot who the third drummer was. When they played out in the Download Festival, just to hear that was pretty amazing because you can hear the difference.
Yeah, those are one-off things, though. I mean, it's not quite the same.
Right. No, but you're never going to get a show without Mustaine. Like when he was going through his cancer treatments, he did not go on the boat for the Mega Cruise. They did not play as Megadeth, although I believe the guys did show up on the boat and played with the other musicians, but they didn't play as Megadeth.
Yeah.
So, in summary, we've discussed back and forth the positives and negatives and the dislikes and likes of bands with or without certain members, and I think ultimately we don't have any. We're happy to see the show. I think in the end. Yeah.
Well, I think what it boils down to is there's a lot of bands out there that are playing. There's a lot of new music, a lot of old music, more than there's ever been. And it's up to you to decide, is this band worth my time and my money? Is it worth it to you to see a band with one member that's still around, no members that are still around? That's what it boils down to.
I'll pay my money to go see Foreigner. with one original member or no original members, rather than going to see Rat with Bobby Blotzer on drums or LA Guns with Stephen Riley on drums. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to pay money. I'll do the free shows with the Black Horse Limo. So maybe.
So yeah,
I won't even go to a free show for Stephen Riley.
So please, on our social media, which we'll mention later, be sure to mention like some of these bands if you agree, if you want to go see them with their current incarnations, or if you went to see them during the time when it was, Black Sabbath in the 80s, something like that. We're definitely curious to know.
Yes, we're curious to know. We're curious to know whether or not you're going to go see Kiss.
And we're also curious to know if you agree with our Big Four today.
All right. Our Big Four today is the Big Four worst album covers in metal. So, I know you guys can't see the covers, but you can look them up for yourself when you go on the internet.
And we'll be posting them to our social media.
So we're going to post mine, my Big Four. We're going to post Chris's Big Four. And then you guys out there can post what you think is the 4 worst album covers in metal. And we'll even get to, obviously if you're following on social media, everyone will get to see what you pick or what you state. And if you have something good to say, then we'll probably read it on the air. Chris, what's your Big Four worst album covers?
My first is going to be Accept, Balls to the Wall.
Oh, really?
Hairy dude zoomed in on his junk with a ball in his hand. Not what I wanted to buy when I was a kid getting into metal.
Why not?
It just, kind of projected the wrong image to me. I honestly kind of, overlooked Accept for a while when I was a little kid because I just didn't want to. I didn't want to buy the album with the hairy leg on it.
You don't really see any junk on there, but you do see the hairy leg. I mean, I get that it's a hairy leg and he's got a ball. It's really, and then you see the leather, so there's something kind of S&M-ish going on there.
Yeah.
But if you're a kid, you shouldn't know anything about S&M. I
watched Law and Order instead of cartoons as a kid.
You're messed up, man. Well, yeah, that's a weird cover. I wouldn't necessarily have thought of that one. There is, if anybody was checking out our social media prior to this show airing, you'll know that I picked a different. Just as an example, I picked a different Accept album as one of the worst ones, and that was for I'm a Rebel, which I have no idea what the hell's going on with that cover. I mean, it's just I think they literally cut people out and pasted them into a phone booth and put the phone booth in the middle of a picture of people driving around the city. That was just weird.
It's just like terrible Photoshop.
Terrible Photoshop.
All right, it was before Photoshop, but you get the point.
Yeah. All right, so you picked Accepts, Balls to the Wall. All right, what else you got?
I'm going to go Typo Negative, Origin of Feces.
Wow, Typo Negative, Origin of Feces. I got to pick this up because I have no idea what this one is.
All I got to say is Peter Steele's Anus.
All right, do I have to look this up? The Origin of Feces. Hello there.
It's just
Holy
a zoom
crap.
in of Peter Steele's anus.
I think he was a subject on the what's the Pantera cover?
Far Beyond Driven.
Far Beyond Driven. I think that's the same picture, just with a big old machine going up. I've never seen that before. I worked in a record store.
I've never glad to never see it for the longest time.
See, I saw the reissue. That's what it is. I saw. Thank God I saw the reissue. I never knew that. God, I'm glad I didn't. Now I can't unsee it. Shit. All right, number 3.
Number 3. It's not necessarily a metal album, but I gotta mention this one, even if we gotta discount it. But any fans of Black Flag out there, when they reformed and did What the? You talk about a terrible South Park fan art that was colored in MS Paint. That's what it is. It looks like somebody's kid on the weekend drew it and was like, let's scan it in and put it in paint.
Now that I get to see it, it's pretty bad. It's a cartoon. It's a bad cartoon. It's horrible. Although I've been negatively affected by Typo Negative for the rest of my life. So that is, and you know what? And I've actually looked at Cannibal Corpse albums, and I think those are more acceptable than that type.
Well, the art's not bad on the Cannibal Corpse albums. They're a little disgusting.
Yeah,
a tad.
So this Black Flag album, yeah, that's kind of goofy. I mean, for a band as hardcore and punk as they are, it's like very kiddish.
Well, yeah, that was what kind of always stood out to me about that album. Aside from the fact that it's not the lineup that I always listen to, it was that all of their albums, while not the best art ever, had a very pop art feel that was really cool. This one just was bad in general. Yeah, nothing redeeming about this cover.
It doesn't look like it whatsoever. So what's your last one?
My number one, I guess, is "Dance of Death" from Iron Maiden.
Oh wow, you went there.
Yeah. It's as a 3D artist myself, looking at that is just I don't know any way to put it other than dreadful.
You know what's funny about that album, that cover? If they would have not put the women jesters on there, it's an actually really cool cover. Think about it. Go past it. Take those people out. The guy, the little Reaper holding his hand out with the other Reapers in the background.
Okay, conceptually, it is kind of cool. But in practice, it's horrible. The 3D is just bad. It's awkward. It's unfinished. You can actually see. It looks like the guy was basically painting over the 3D models, and you can see the masks look finished. The guy in the center, Eddie, as a Reaper, looks finished. The woman next to him looks finished, but the rest of them look unfinished. They look like really bad 3D models that have no texture. There's a baby standing on a wolf, which is impossible. Not just because it's a baby standing on a wolf, but because look at his foot placement.
Yeah, I mean, the album is the cover is terrible, but like I said, the Eddie is a Reaper. The original design, none of those characters with masks were on there.
But that's what was put out.
No, that was what was put out. Had they done the original with just a little star thing on the floor and the five guys...
Oh, it could have been cool.
It would have been amazing. But this thing...
You throw in the 3D art and it's...
This is...
horrible.
What's funny is Iron Maiden had already passed that whole computer period where they were putting out stupid computer images, and then they decided to put this thing out. Yeah, that was pretty pathetic. I never... until recently, when I started listening to the podcast and listening to Talking Maiden, shout out to you guys, I never really paid attention to this album cover. I never really paid attention to the album. I know that they had a couple of good songs off it, but this, shout out to Talking Maiden for getting me into this album because I hadn't listened to much of it other than the first couple songs.
It's a pretty damn good album.
It is. That I never paid attention to the album cover until they were criticizing it, and I'm like, wow, that's really bad. But then looking at the original, when you look it up, if you guys go out there and look up at the original concept of the album cover, it was supposed to be really good, and then somehow Steve Harris decided to add more to it, and it's always Steve's fault because he's the one who's never satisfied.
I mean, I'm obsessed with box art. I know it's kind of a weird thing, but I love a good box set. When they throw in the extras, that kind of stuff. I just love that concept. I love boxes. Looking at that album was such a turnoff for the longest time because it's just such a bad image. It's got these finished aspects that are just totally destroyed by the bad 3D.
Oh yeah, no, it's pretty bad.
Well, what you got?
Okay, so my big four worst album covers. I'm going to go number 4 with Anthrax, Fistful of Metal.
That was in my list that I was trying to choose from.
I mean, cartoonish, and then they have a hand pointing, basically coming out of the guy's face in the wrong direction.
It doesn't make any sense at all.
No.
The direction, like the hand that's holding the head behind, and then you have a fist coming from hammer space through the guy's face.
It doesn't make a bit of sense whatsoever. I mean, the drawing is very amateurish. Not horrible, but very amateurish. And then this fist coming out of nowhere with his tongue going one way and Yeah, it's terrible.
It looks like something that, being a high school artist, I probably could have pulled off, and then
it's almost like a demo cover.
Yeah, I mean, Scott Ian actually said that he hates the album cover, but it's really all they could afford at the time.
I'm sure they hate it just as much as Megadeth hates, the original "Killing Is My Business" cover. And that's not even on my list, but that's a pretty bad one too. All right, number 3, we're gonna go to we're gonna go back to Iron Maiden, and we're picking up the X Factor. That's just. I'm sorry. I grew up with Iron Maiden, Killers, Number of the Beast, Peace of Mind, all those classic, iconic album covers, and then I'm giving this when you have your singer quit, and you're trying to inspire people to come listen to your band with a new singer, and you come up with this ugly rubberized Eddie that is just horrible.
It's terrible.
It's very frightening, actually. I mean, it could give someone nightmares.
It's frightening in a bad way, though.
Yes, it's disgusting.
What's funny about it is you have Fear of the Dark, which is the first album. It has a cover not by Derek Riggs, and it's very cool album cover. It really is. And then you follow it up, X Factor, with this rubbery plastic Eddie. It's just bad. Now there is a version of the cover that's more zoomed out, which looks a little better. But still, it's still
that makes it worse because what the hell is that in the middle? It's terrible.
Terrible, absolutely terrible.
Just like that impersonation, it's just not worthy to me of anything Iron Maiden has done. I mean, and then right up there with Dance to Death being just a mosh of stuff put together for no reason. All right, so that's number 3. Number 2 for me, it's a toss-up between number 1 and number 2. It's almost like a tie, okay? Pantera's Metal Magic. What the hell is that thing on the cover? Is that supposed to be some sort of beast?
Yeah, it's a panther.
Yeah, I get it, but it don't look like a panther.
You could really go with any of the first albums from Pantera before Cowboys, excluding Power Metal.
Power Metal had that goofy one with, I'm in my hair metal stage, picture in the front.
But that one is pretty dang bad. You have a warrior panther man.
I mean, it's a human panther is basically what it is, and it's really bad. I mean, he's got, he's physically very fit. Okay, but you're talking about Pantera, basically a graffiti art, and then you got this humanized panther, with this weird looking knife, sword, hatchet.
It's fantasy art.
It's fantasy art, but
it would look great on the back of a van.
I don't even think it would look. Oh man, it was horrible. That's terrible. So. And then the other album that they had that was really bad too was
it was the previous album.
The previous album that was terrible. But we're gonna stick with Power Metal. Oh, Projects in the Jungle. That's a terrible album cover.
It's hard to figure out what's going on that. That there's like 2 giant paws just coming out of nowhere, and
well, that's supposed to be a stage. I get that. I understand that.
Yeah,
but it's just weird.
It's just badly executed.
Yeah. Well,
and it also looks like there's only about 27 people in the audience.
We can also go back to the fact that there was no budget for this, and I get they probably drew it themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm cool with that. They're in high school.
Set of Crayola markers and
yeah. Come on. Yeah, they had the Dollar Tree magic marker set. Yeah, so we know that it was done on a very limited. Hey, buddy, can you give me a drawing budget?
Yeah.
But still, it's bad. And now, for a band that had a budget, because Anthrax didn't have a budget, I'll give them that. Pantera had no budget, they had less of a budget than Anthrax. Iron Maiden had a budget. I don't know what the hell they did with it. But Aerosmith's first album, that is my number 1. That is quite possibly the most pathetic album. Because you know what? At least Pantera made an effort to do something. Aerosmith made no effort whatsoever on that first album cover. And then, not only that, then they looked disinterested. Like, why are we here taking a picture? I mean, was it Joe Perry's not even looking at the camera.
I don't think Steve Perry was looking at the camera at all.
No, he wasn't. I mean, it's just, I mean, seriously, that album cover is one of the worst.
Well, they're just kind of floating in the clouds.
And they're floating. I mean, so there's two of them. There's two versions. There's one where they're floating in the clouds with the same picture that's zoomed up on the other version. So if you have the zoomed up one that takes up the whole cover, you have 5 guys in the front.
That's at least a little better.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's not Joe Perry. It's Joey Kramer. He's so disinterested. Like, he's not even looking.
He's just looking over to the side.
I mean, yeah. I mean, he's not. But what is it? Hey, do I have to be here? I mean, that's what he's saying. And the rest of the guys just look like, yeah, we're tough guys from Boston. But
well, except for Brad Hamilton, he's just kind of smiling like it's his yearbook photo.
He looks like he just graduated. It's a bad high school photo. All right, so we've talked about replacement members. We've talked about bands and how they are, original members not being there, replacement members there, how they sound, who they like, if we want to go see them. And we've talked about some of the worst album covers out there. Tell the people how they can find us.
Well, if you liked our Big Four, or just want to send us some pictures of bad album covers, be sure to check us out on social media. Like us on Facebook under Debating Metal, or follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Debating Metal. If you prefer, you can email us at debatingmetal@gmail.com. You can listen to us by downloading the Podbean app or streaming us on podbean.com. We are also now on iTunes, so subscribe, listen, and rate us. If you agreed with our comments or just want to rip us a new one, be sure to leave your comments so we can read them, and if we like them, we'll read them on the show.
Well, that's this show for this week. We will see you next week. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.